How can you effectively use praise to positively influence other people's behavior? How can you use it to get your children, your employees, your subordinates, or even your parents, your friends, your partner, or your boss to behave more in a way that you want them to? How can you use it to more deeply connect with those people and show them that you see them for what they do right, not just what they do wrong? Those questions and more answered in today's video. Hello and welcome back to Black, White, Gray, Yellow. My name is Diana and this channel is all about communication, connection, and resilience. Today I want to talk about effective praise, or how to positively influence the behavior of others. As a quick background on me, I'm a Master Resilience Trainer in the United States Army National Guard. I also served 13 months as the State Resilience Coordinator at my state's Joint Force Headquarters. This series is based on the research behind the skills taught as part of that program, replacing proprietary material with references to open source research and books. So you can share these videos freely. If you want to see more, be sure to like and subscribe. As I said, the subject of today's video is a skill called effective praise, which is a fairly straightforward concept if you're familiar with the idea of constructive criticism. But just to make sure everyone is on the same page, let's take some time to talk about that first. If someone does something wrong, of course there are a number of ways you could respond to it. Let's say you asked your significant other to clean the kitchen and he just isn't doing it up to your standards. One way you could respond is simply to tell him that he's doing it wrong and take over. With no more specific feedback, the only thing he learns from the exchange is that he's off the hook for cleaning. And I suspect that this is how women frequently end up doing all the chores in the house while men watch sports or play video games or whatever it is that they do. If you can't personally relate to this example, I suspect there may be another example where you've been either the criticizer or the one being criticized in this way. So tell me in the comments what that thing is in your household. Of course, you could not let him off the hook and just tell him that he's doing it wrong and demand that he do better, but without any specific direction, the likelihood that he'll suddenly have the divine inspiration to understand what it is you're looking for is slim. This is likely to only escalate tension until he quits in anger, and then once again, you're left doing all the cleaning if it's going to get done at all. Okay, so clearly what I'm getting at is that you can provide more specific direction about what exactly he's doing wrong so that he can correct it. Once you put the dishes in the dishwasher, don't forget to run it. Honey, that sponge is disgusting. Please rinse it out when you're done wiping the counters. The floor is part of the kitchen too, sweetheart. Please also sweep and run the Swiffer before you go watch the game. This kind of coaching, with specific examples to help turn the bad job into a better job, is what makes criticism constructive. It isn't just about saying something nice to lessen the sting of negative feedback. It's about identifying clearly what behavior you want to see change and how. It also helps take the criticism away from the person and puts it on specific things that the person can change, which is much less likely to result in the person becoming defensive. In other words, they're more likely to hear you and actually implement the changes you're suggesting. If you aren't already doing this with your family, friends, students, employees, or anybody else, today is a great day to give it a try. It'll take practice to do consistently, but it's a habit worth building. I'll put links in the description to a few articles about the benefits of constructive criticism. The list includes increased empathy, stronger trust, greater productivity, and improved innovation and creativity. Okay, so now let's talk about effective praise. In essence, it's just the inverse of constructive criticism, and it has a lot of the same benefits. Instead of, or in addition to, criticizing when people do something wrong, the idea is to provide the same kind of clear, specific feedback about the things they're doing right. So, with your significant other, some examples might be, "Hey honey, the counters look really good. Thank you for wiping them down. I feel so much less anxiety now that the sink isn't full of dishes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for scrubbing the backsplash behind the stove, honey. I know those grease stains can be tough, but it looks great." Why is this such a novel idea? Well, in practice, a lot of the time we don't give this kind of feedback. Instead, we tend to do about any of 4 different things that undermine our connection or relationship with the other person. The first of these is to give no praise at all, just criticism, if someone is doing an okay job that nonetheless leaves room for improvement. This is most often due to the negativity bias. We're more likely to notice what people are doing wrong and less likely to notice what they're doing right. Or we're more likely to think that what they're doing wrong is more important or significant than what they're doing right. We talked a lot about the negativity bias when discussing optimism in our video on the 6 things resilient people have, so if you haven't seen that already, check out that video after this one. Another way we might respond to people doing an okay job is to take for granted that they know what right looks like and that they'll do it left to their own devices. So when we see it, we don't give any feedback at all. When your significant other cleans the kitchen, as you asked him to, you figure that was his job, so why does he need praise for that? We often do this with children, students, or subordinates who meet but fail to exceed expectations as well, such as doing their homework every day but not doing so in a way that necessarily deserves praise. I hear this most often from leaders in the military who see no reason to praise their soldiers for passing a physical fitness test, as any soldier should be able to do. A third way to respond, and what research suggests, links in the description, is the worst thing we can do, is provide vacuous or empty praise. Great job, thumbs up, gold star. This is when we lack the kind of specific feedback that we talked about with constructive criticism. Without anything specific to point to, the praise is dubious for a lot of people. When everything is awesome, it's hard to believe that anything is. Adults and children alike tend to be suspicious of this kind of empty praise, doubting that it is sincere and even suspecting that it could be malicious or mocking. This suspicion can start in children as young as age 7, according to a 2007 New York Times article by American journalist and author Poe Bronson, link in the description. Research by German psychologist Wilhelm Meyer, published in 1992, showed that the 12-year-old students in his studies were so suspicious of their teacher's praise that they actually flipped the significance of praise and criticism. They believed that praise was an indication that their teacher believed them so incapable that they needed additional encouragement. And it was only their teacher's criticism, not his praise, that conveyed confidence in the child's ability because it seemed he was holding them to a higher standard. New York University professor of psychiatry Judith Brooke, also quoted in Bronson's article, explains that the problem is one of credibility. Bronson summarizes, once children hear praise they determine as meritless, they discount not just the insincere praise, but the sincere praise as well. Lastly, pioneering psychologist Carol Dweck, famous for her 1988 paper on growth versus fixed mindsets, author of the 2007 book Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, and now the Lewis and Virginia Eaton Professor of Psychology at Stanford University, writes that we can mess up praise by targeting the person, not the process. With or without specific feedback, telling a child that they are smart, for example, praising them as opposed to any action they took in their process, encourages a fixed mindset, dividing the world into things that the child can do and things that they can't, diminishing their level of effort toward any kind of growth, which can quickly backfire. We'll talk more about this in a minute. So how do we do better? Well, in the case where a job left room for improvement and it's tempting to provide all criticism, no praise, we may just need to do a little look for the good, as we talked about in the earlier video on that skill, link in the description. By making a conscious effort to notice and dwell on the good as much as we do the bad, we need not ignore the bad and pretend it doesn't exist, but we can acknowledge that the good exists alongside it. The result might be a compliment sandwich, as I heard it called when I was in school. Hey honey, the kitchen looks really good. I really appreciate you getting the grease stains behind the stove. I know that can be a tough job. Next time, I'd really appreciate it if you'd also rinse the sponge and mop the floor, but my anxiety is already so much lower now that the sink is clear. Thanks for everything you did. In the case where someone meets but fails to exceed expectations, Teach Like a Champion author Doug Lemov suggests differentiating acknowledgement from praise. You have your homework ready every day, and I appreciate you having your homework ready every day are examples of acknowledgement without a value judgment of praise. Saying, it's awesome you have your homework ready every day is praise, and you'd be right to be reluctant to provide it, because it implies that having her homework ready every day is somehow going above and beyond, or that you didn't really expect her to do it. This can backfire by telling the person, the child in this case, but the principle applies just as much to adults, that they can meet expectations by doing less. Of course, if they did a truly exceptional job on the homework, telling them that with praise would not have the same potential negative consequence. In other words, Lemov is saying that yes, praise should be reserved for when expectations are exceeded, but that acknowledgement can still be used to encourage people to continue meeting expectations when they do. To maintain credibility with children and adults alike, get out of the habit of using empty praise. Always point to something concrete and specific, just as we do with constructive criticism. This is often the part that takes the most practice because from the time we are children, we are so used to getting only specific feedback on the things we did poorly. A poorly written paper may get all kinds of red marks all over it where specific corrections are required, but a well-written paper often gets little or no specific feedback. What about that paper made it A quality? Was there anything about it that really stood out? In the case of a well-played game, what about that particular game made it so effective? About that particular play? What about someone's interview made you choose them over another candidate? Most of the research in this field is done with children, but from my own personal experience in both military and civilian contexts, I have no reason to doubt that the psychology is exactly the same for adults. Lastly, and as already alluded to in what we've already discussed, Carol Dweck tells us to praise the process, not the person. We might be tempted to say that a child who gets an A on a paper is smart, or that a significant other who cleans the kitchen is a great partner. But the danger here is creating an association between the personal value and the performance. The child who is told they are smart because they perform well is less likely to try things where they might not perform well, and are more likely to quit on things that they aren't instantly good at because it means that they aren't smart at that thing. Carol Dweck's work tells us that with a growth mindset, we understand that doing something we are bad at is the first step to being less bad at it, and we wouldn't want either our child or our significant other to shy away from getting better. So instead of praising the person, we praise the process. You worked really hard on that paper, and it turned out really well. Use specifics. You had a very clear thesis, your arguments flowed really well, and I thought you had a compelling conclusion. Likewise, honey, I can tell you worked really hard on the kitchen, and I am so grateful. I especially love how you scrubbed the grout behind the stove. It looks spotless, and overall, it just feels so much less stressful in here now. Thank you. Both constructive criticism and effective praise are about providing feedback someone needs to hear in order to shape or better future behavior. We correct someone because we want them to change their behavior going forward in a specific way. We give effective praise because we want them to keep doing something that they did well this time. If we don't say this explicitly, we have no reason to assume that they will keep this behavior the same next time. One real-world example of how this concept is applied is in what the military calls an after-action review, or AAR. A typical AAR involves naming specific behaviors that the unit wants to improve and specific behaviors that the unit wants to sustain. The improves are the constructive criticism. This is what didn't go well, and ideally this is what we should do instead next time. The sustains are the effective praise. This is the behavior that got these desired results, so we should keep doing that next time. In a military context, an AAR can be anything from a quick huddle to an overly formal process, and obviously I would not expect you to do anything formal when giving feedback to a friend or loved one, but the same concept can be applied in a casual context to the same effect. In the language of the 6 things resilient people have, effective praise helps build connection. It shows that you are really paying attention to what someone is doing, that you're fighting the negativity bias to notice and find significance in what they're doing right, and that you value the work that they're doing. And remember that the more connected we feel to other people, the better we are able to withstand, overcome, and even thrive in the face of adversity. Finally, let's think about effective praise in terms of patterns of behavior. When you ask someone to do something and then you only criticize their work or give them no feedback at all, how likely do you think it is that they'll keep trying? Maybe you have personal experience with how well this goes. It doesn't. If you give constructive criticism but only generic praise, studies show you can lose credibility, even when your praise is sincere. If you tell someone they are great when they do a great job, we already discussed how this can backfire when they inevitably find or do something that they aren't great at. On the other hand, if we give clear, specific feedback, both constructive criticism and effective praise, how motivated do you think they'll be to keep trying and work harder? Studies show pretty motivated. So that is how you influence positive behavior change. If only it were so easy, right? Obviously, these skills take a lot of practice, but because we believe in a growth mindset, we know that it's okay to try and be bad at this at first, and that practice will make us better. Hey, Diana. Great job on your effective praise lesson today. Really? You liked it? I mean, but aren't you biased? Well, sure, I'm biased, but in particular, I wanted to say I thought you did a great job doing your own research on this topic and elaborating on it, even though the Army's MRT program keeps it pretty simple. Obviously, the reason why there's so much research on this topic is because there's a lot of interest in it, so I think your audience will really appreciate the extra effort you went to for this video. Wow, thank you. I really appreciate that specific feedback. You're welcome. Now, of course, as the voice of cynicism, I also have plenty of constructive criticism to give you, but I'll wait for you to come to me for that. Let's talk about it over coffee so I can be in the right mindset and take notes. Absolutely. This was supposed to be a short video because this is like a 2-page skill in the Army's program, but it turns out there's a ton more research on positive reinforcement that's all relevant to this conversation, so I hope you got a lot out of this video. I referenced a couple other videos in this one, so if you haven't seen them yet, check out my videos on the looking for the good skill and the 6 things resilient people have. But that's all for this one. If you found it helpful, please leave a like, and I'd love you to practice your constructive criticism and effective praise in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. Until next time, my name is Diana, and this has been Black, White, Gray, Yellow.